Let's do a little poll, or anybody want to give a comment on what your thoughts on soy are? Yes, that's an exactly a very good point that we want to talk about today. Yes, okay. I'm so glad that that's what you've heard. Not a fan? Why not a fan?
I don't tolerate it.
Okay, well that's certainly okay. Yeah.
Had it for breakfast.
Yeah, I had it for dinner yesterday, and tempeh's a soy product. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Okay, I coined a phrase, I think I coined it, so you guys can't use it. To soy or not to soy. Okay, and I should trademark that, and maybe I'll make some money. I'll make a shirt. Maybe I'll make a shirt with that. Before I became more plant-based in my lifestyle, I didn't even know what a soybean was. Isn't that weird? And who knows what edamame is? It's a soybean in its pod, and it's a younger soybean, or they consider it an immature soybean. So it's green. So anytime I eat edamame, it's green. But I didn't realize that the mature soybean is actually creamy colored or white, okay, which I was not aware of. And so that's how I came to that realization as well. Yeah. I think first I'll just start by saying what I'm going to convey to you today is not only is it highly likely that soy is not harmful for you, but that also consuming soy on a regular basis is highly beneficial for both women and men at all stages of life. Okay, that's the point I'm going to try to get across. So anybody know where this confusion came from? Why do people think soy is bad for you? And I say mammalian estrogens, right? Because there are estrogens and mammalian estrogens in a lot of foods we eat also, but also we make our own estrogen. So yeah, there's that's where the confusion comes from, and the idea that it might be, there's that term phytoestrogen, which means plant estrogen, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Estrogens can be bad for humans, okay, at certain parts of our lives. Now, women need estrogen in their normal development and in their normal life cycles, but at some point, higher estrogen exposure has been associated with increased risk of breast cancer, increased risk of breast cancer recurrence, and increased risk of cervical and uterine cancers. And in men, high estrogen exposure is associated with man boobs. How's that? Okay. If you've got a plant product called phytoestrogen, there's been this confusion, and this started back in the 80s. Here we are, we're 50 years in the future. Our science has advanced 50 years, but take us back 50 years, and there was just this leap of faith, or this jump in conclusion that was made that phytoestrogens had the same impact as mammalian estrogens. And that's where part of the bad rap came from. And then I think there was one paper back when that came out with a position statement that phytoestrogens had the same impact as mammalian estrogens, and that caught fire in the scientific community and then spread. Now I'll tell you that paper has been subsequently discredited extensively. A lot of the assumptions they made were wrong. You know, one of those being that phytoestrogens worked the same way on the estrogen receptor. So that paper has been disproven. The reality is, why are they called plant estrogens or phytoestrogens? And it's because they have an estrogen-like compound as a part of the molecule. And now there's some other parts of it, and the reality is they do bind to the estrogen receptor. And there are two types of estrogen receptor. There's an alpha and a beta. The alpha receptor is the one that turns on estrogen effects in the cell and in the body. The beta receptor is the one that actually turns off estrogen effects. And so these molecules, estrogen and phytoestrogens, are like keys. When they bind to the receptor, they activate or turn the receptor and then turn on the effects of it. So the reality is that phytoestrogens have a multi-thousand more affinity for the beta receptor than they do for the alpha receptor, which means they have literally anti-estrogenic effects as relative to estrogen. Let's talk a little bit about the science. Now, in the ensuing decades, there are now over 40,000 scientific articles that have been published on soy and soy products. That's an astounding number of products. And I will tell you today, if the preponderance of the evidence had been that soy was bad for you, there wouldn't be as much soy production as there is in the United States and the world. Oh, by the way, it's very interesting. So soy was a very little known and very used product in the United States in the 1700s and 1800s. And then in the 1900s, it began to start to be produced as a staple product. But more soy was produced in Southeast Asia and in the Eastern countries. But now, the largest producer of soy in the world is the United States. And the United States is the largest exporter of soy products in the world. And actually, most of our soy products go to, can anybody get a guess? Marla? Yes, animal feed. Yeah. So I forgot to put that in earlier, so I wanted to throw that out there. So the preponderance of the evidence shows no ill effects of consuming soy in regular amounts. Population studies that look and epidemiologic studies that look at Asian and Southeast Asian countries who have a high intake of soy food show that there's not only no increased incidence of breast cancers, but there appears to be a decreased incidence of breast cancer. I think that's really important. So what we're finding out is that soy is actually protective. In fact, in westernized countries, as these countries have become more westernized and their intake of soy has gone down, they have now begun to have an increased incidence of Western-based cancers, and especially these hormonal cancers, such as breast cancer, uterine cancer, and cervical cancer. The American Institute of Cancer Research and the American Cancer Association have now come out with position statements, and this is not new, these are 3 or 4 years old. These position statements say that it's okay for women with breast cancer to consume soy. There's even data that shows, and now it's more conclusive, that women who consume soy decrease their incidence of cancer, and for those women who have breast cancer, they decrease their incidence of breast cancer recurrence relative to breast cancer patients who do not eat soy. So again, not only is soy protective, but it also protects you against breast cancer recurrence. There's studies too coming out of Southeast Asia where there's a high incidence of eating soy, that young women in the pubescent and adolescent ages who eat 3 to 4 servings of soy a day have a significantly decreased incidence of breast cancer for the rest of their lives. So I think that's a really important point as well. So what about men? Well, so we'll start with the man boobs. Clinical studies now conclusively show that men do not have any feminizing effects from the intake of phytoestrogens and soy. That's up to, there's been studies that have looked at, I think, up to 6 servings a day, which is a fairly high amount. It's very hard to get 6 servings of soy a day. I shoot for 2 or 3 or 4, and I have a hard time doing it. So there's no feminizing effects of soy for men. And interestingly enough, again, we talked about hormonal cancers in women. Now, the biggest hormonal cancer in men is prostate cancer. It's also the #1 cancer. And what they've shown now, and there's lots of studies to support this, is that men who eat a lot of soy have a lesser incidence of prostate cancer, 52% less than the general population. So you literally cut your prostate cancer risk in half if you regularly eat soy as a man. And for the most common cancer in men, and I can't remember the number, but over the course of our lifetime, maybe somebody in the healthcare community can confirm or deny, but I think up to 9% of men get prostate cancer at some point in their lives. Okay, it's a very common cancer in men. So you can cut your risk from 9% to 4.5% by eating soy regularly. And then the other thing is for men who have prostate cancer, you decrease your recurrence risk by 53% if you regularly eat soy. That's really it for me to just, my short spiel to say that soy is not only not harmful for you, but it's actually beneficial for you. And then I wanted to conclude by talking about what are some soy products and how should you eat soy. Any thoughts here? Tempeh, yeah. Somebody mentioned tempeh, yeah. Edamame and tempeh. So soy curls, yeah. So you want to get your soy as close to the natural product as possible and as minimally processed as possible. Tofu, for example, is actually a processed food because it's not exactly in its natural form. You know, they take the soybeans, they soak it in water, then they crush up the beans, then they extract the milk, and then they create a curd, and then from that curd, they create the various forms of tofu. So it's minimally processed. Soy milk, you can get a variety of soy milks, and some are ultra processed, and then some are far more natural. So you want to be careful about the soy milk you use, but that's how you can get some soy. You want to get, if you do get soy milk, you don't want one that's been reconstituted from protein isolate, because that's actually been shown to be bad for you. So look for their ingredients, and if it says protein from protein isolate, don't buy that one. Okay, we mentioned tempeh, edamame, miso soup, and something called natto, N-A-T-T-O. Who's had natto? Natalie has had natto. And anybody else? I have not. I don't know what it's like. What is it? Okay, so she said it's fermented. Well, I knew it was fermented soybean, but she said it's slimy and good. So everybody should try it. Okay, guys, I hope this helped, and I will take a few questions, and then we'll get walking. 13%, so it's even higher than I thought. Thank you. He said 13% of men, according to the CDC, get prostate cancer in their lifetime. I thought it was 1 in 11, but that makes it 1 in 8 or 9. Yeah. He was mentioning that autopsy studies show that upwards of 80% of men have prostate cancer cells when they die. Well, and that's one of the things about prostate cancer. It is a cancer that many men can live with if you're fortunate enough not to have an aggressive form. It is manageable. But no one wants it. You're living with cancer, you're living with bone pain, you're living with all sorts of complications. You're living with the thought that it could progress and kill you. So let's prevent it by eating some soy rather than trying to live with it. Yeah, we're all about prevention. Yeah, I think that's good. Let's get going.